Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. Today we're looking at, well, it's a bit of a mystery, actually. The curious case of Ben White and the England squad.
Yeah, missing from the England squad.
Right. We've got a ton of articles here and even a podcast interview.
Oh, wow.
So we're going to use these sources to figure out what's going on.
And why he left the squad.
Yeah, why did he leave?
Yeah.
I mean, Ben White's doing great at Arsenal, and now there's a new manager, Thomas Tuchel,
Oh, right.
who might want him back.
Yeah.
But the thing is, there are all these conflicting reports about why he left in the first place. Plus, some people are pointing fingers at the former manager, Gareth Southgate.
Some serious accusations.
Yeah, so the big question is, did Ben White just walk away from playing for England?
Well, it was during that World Cup in Qatar back in 2022 when he left the squad.
Right?
And there were these rumors going around about problems with the assistant manager, Steve Holland. Some are even saying that Holland questioned White's commitment to the game. And, you know, we can't forget that White didn't get a lot of playing time in the Euros back in 2020.
Yeah, he was on the squad but didn't really play.
Right, mostly sat on the bench.
So maybe some tension with the coaching staff?
Yeah.
But is that really enough to make someone leave the World Cup?
Well, that's what we're trying to figure out. And to add fuel to the fire, there's this really outspoken football commentator.
Okay.
Dubz, I think you've probably heard of him.
Yeah.
He's got this podcast called The Sound of Sport.
Right.
And he's absolutely convinced that White is happy to play for Tuchel now. Which to him means that the problem was always with Southgate and Holland, not with representing England itself.
So basically, Dubz is saying it was a personality clash more than anything else.
Well, he actually goes a step further. He accuses Southgate of straight up lying about the situation and making White look bad.
Oh, wow.
He even said on his podcast, and I'm paraphrasing here, that Southgate should have just admitted there was a falling out.
Those are pretty serious accusations. Does that mean we should just ignore what Southgate has said?
Well, it's important to look at it from all sides, and that's why I think this next part is really interesting. There's this interview with White from 2021, right after he got called up to the England team for the first time.
Okay.
And he gets really emotional, talking about how he and his family cried for like a whole hour after he got the news. You can tell how much it meant to him to play for England.
So on the one hand, you've got Dubz saying White never wanted to play for England under Southgate. And on the other hand, you've got this interview where he's clearly over the moon to be part of the team. How do we make sense of that?
Yeah, that's the tricky part. Trying to piece together these seemingly opposite bits of information. What do you think? Can we reconcile White's emotional reaction back then with what Dubz is claiming? Or is there more to it? It really makes you think about how we should interpret these public statements and all the stories that get built up around these situations.
Yeah, it's easy to get swept up in the drama and pick a side. But we need to remember that there are real people at the heart of this, with real emotions.
Exactly, and we're only getting a tiny glimpse of the whole picture.
Right.
But before we get too deep into the psychology of it all, let's talk about what this actually means for White's career. Because even if he wants to come back, there are some real challenges he'll need to overcome. That England squad is incredibly competitive.
True. He can't just stroll back in expecting a starting position. So who would he be up against?
Well, first you've got Trent Alexander-Arnold. He's been amazing at right back.
Yeah.
Then there's Reece James, although he has been struggling with injuries. And of course, you can't forget about Kyle Walker. He's still a force to be reckoned with, even though he's a veteran.
It's a tough group to break into.
It is, and to really understand why it's so tough, we should probably talk about the difference between playing right back and center back.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Yeah.
I think some people listening might not be totally familiar with all the positions. I have to admit I get them mixed up sometimes too.
Sure, no problem. So imagine the England team lined up, defending their goal. The center backs are those two central defenders, the last line of defense before the goalkeeper.
Right.
They have to be strong, good in the air, and able to anticipate what's going to happen. Now, the right back is positioned on the right side of the defense.
Okay.
They need to be fast to cover that side of the field, good at tackling, and able to contribute to both defense and attack.
So it's not just about being a good defender in general. You need specific skills for each position.
Right.
So where does Ben White fit into all of this? He's been playing really well as a right back for Arsenal.
He has. And that's what makes this whole thing even more interesting. Because even though he's great at right back, White has actually said he sees himself more as a center back naturally.
So does that hurt his chances of getting back on the England squad? Or help them?
That's hard to say. If there's more competition at right back, maybe it makes sense for him to try and secure a center back spot.
Yeah.
But that could mean learning a whole new system. and maybe changing his playing style.
Right, definitely adds another layer of complexity.
It does. And on top of all that, there's another factor we need to consider. Something that could really throw a wrench in any comeback plans.
You mean his injury?
Exactly.
He just had knee surgery.
He did. And it's likely to keep him sidelined for a few months, so he's going to miss valuable playing time. And, more importantly, the chance to prove himself to Tuchel.
So even if White wants to come back, and Tuchel wants him on the team, this injury creates a whole lot of uncertainty, makes you wonder if his time with England is over, or if he'll get another shot eventually. It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. What do you think is most likely to happen?
Well, that's something we'll dive into when we come back for part 2 of this deep dive.
All right, so we've kind of laid out the Ben White situation. He leaves the England squad. Nobody knows exactly why. Then he gets injured. It's complicated.
It really is. What gets me, though, is how this whole thing shows just how tricky things can get between players and managers in football. It's such a high-pressure environment, with everyone expecting so much.
Right, all the media attention, fans scrutinizing every move. It's easy to see how things can go wrong.
Yeah, little misunderstandings, personality clashes, it all just blows up.
And I bet this kind of thing happens all the time behind the scenes.
Oh, absolutely. We only hear about it when it turns into a huge public mess. It makes you think about how important communication is.
Right. Like if White and the coaches had just talked things out, maybe it could have been resolved.
Yeah, maybe. Or maybe they just couldn't see eye to eye. Yep. It happens. It's a good reminder, though, that these players are just people.
Yeah, easy to forget that sometimes.
We see them on the pitch, all these incredible athletes. We assume they're not dealing with the same pressures as everyone else.
Right, but they're human too, with all the same insecurities.
That's what's so interesting about this whole Ben White thing. It reminds us there's a human side to all of this. It's not just about tactics and formations.
Okay, so we've talked about communication, the human element, the complex relationship between players and managers, but let's be realistic. Do you think White will actually make a comeback?
If we just forget about all the drama and speculation and focus on his talent, I think he has a real chance. He's young, versatile, and he's proven he can play at the highest level.
But what about all the competition for those defender spots? The other players you mentioned.
Well, that's where Tuchel's style comes in. He seems to really value versatility. He's not afraid to try different things.
So even with Alexander-Arnold, James, and Walker in the mix, do you think there's room for White?
Possibly, especially if he can get back in top form quickly after his injury.
That injury is a big if, though. But even if he recovers, do we know if Tuchel even wants him on the team? We're just guessing about his management style here.
True. We also don't know how White feels about playing for England again. Maybe this whole thing has made him rethink things.
Yeah, he might be happier just focusing on Arsenal. And remember that interview from 2021 where he was so excited to be called up? It's hard to imagine him just giving that up.
Things change, people change. Maybe something happened during his time with the squad that changed his mind.
Yeah, we really can't assume anything.
Exactly. We like to create these stories in our heads, but the truth is we don't know what's going on with him.
Right. It's like that saying, we only see the tip of the iceberg.
Perfect analogy.
Yeah.
And in this case, the part we don't see is what's really driving Ben White. Why did he leave? Does he want to come back? Those are the big questions.
And we may never know the answers.
That could be true, but there's still a lot we can learn from this. It shows us the complexities of elite sport, the pressure of playing for your country, and how important it is to take care of your mental health.
It's about so much more than just football, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's about understanding each other, communicating effectively, and realizing that there's always more to the story than we see on the surface.
So we've covered the human element, the tactical considerations, the psychology of it all. But what about the timing of all this?
You're right, that's an important point. When are we even talking about for a possible return? The next friendly, the Euro qualifiers, or even further down the line, the next World Cup.
Because even if White is totally committed to coming back, that knee injury throws everything up in the air.
Definitely. Missing the next few months is a huge blow. He needs that time to show Tuchel what he can do.
So even if White wants to return, and Tuchel is willing to give him a chance, this injury makes things a lot more complicated.
It does. But that's football for you. Full of surprises.
It keeps things interesting, right? All the drama, the uncertainty, and the possibility of a comeback.
Speaking of comebacks, there's another twist we haven't really talked about. Remember how White has been playing right back for Arsenal, but he sees himself as the center back?
Yeah, and how that could make his return even more complicated.
What if it actually helps him? What if the key to getting back on the England squad is focusing on center back, not right back?
You're saying he should try to make the team as a center back.
Exactly. The competition for center back might actually be less intense than at right back.
You might be right. Instead of fighting for a spot with all those top right backs, he could have a better chance at center back.
Of course, he still has to prove himself. There are other great center backs out there, but it's a possibility, isn't it?
So this is where things get really interesting. Talented player, recovering from an injury, tons of competition, but maybe a chance to reinvent himself in a new position. It's a whole new chapter for Ben White.
And that's exactly what we'll be looking at in part 3 of this deep dive.
So we've gone over this whole Ben White thing from all sides now, the different reports, the emotional stuff, tactics, even this idea of him coming back as a center back. But I gotta be honest, I'm still kind of confused.
Yeah, you know what I find weird? We don't really know what happened in the England camp. We hear these things about Steve Holland's comments, White not getting enough playing time, but it's all so vague.
It's like we're missing pieces of the puzzle. How are we supposed to know if those issues are even resolved or if they'll stop White from coming back?
Right. Imagine trying to put together one of those jigsaw puzzles, but the most important pieces are missing. You just have this incomplete picture you can't really make sense of. It's those missing details, what actually happened between White and the coaches that we need.
And without knowing that, it's tough to say if White can really come back. It's like trying to figure out who's going to win a match without knowing the players or the rules.
Exactly. Like we're trying to understand Ben White, figure out what he's going to do, but we don't have all the information. It's hard to tell what's real and what's just people making stuff up.
It makes you wonder if those details are being kept secret on purpose. Is there something else going on here that we don't know about?
Maybe. It's definitely possible. Happens all the time with teams. They keep their internal stuff quiet. But let's say those details do come out eventually. What do you think needs to happen for White to get back on the England squad and actually do well?
Well, first things first, he's got to recover from that knee surgery. We said it was a setback, but it doesn't have to be the end of his career. He's young, he works hard. With the right kind of rehab, he should be able to get back to where he was before the injury.
I agree. And when he is back playing, he has to play well, consistently, for Arsenal. Tuchel needs to see he's not just physically ready, but confident and making a difference on the team.
Right, Tuchel's not going to just give him a spot on the team because he feels bad for him. White has to earn it, show everyone he deserves to be there.
Absolutely. And that means going up against some of the best defenders in the world, like we talked about. There's a lot of competition at right back and center back. It's going to be a challenge.
And what about the mental side of things? We talked about how tough this whole thing must have been for White. He needs to be in the right mindset, put the past behind him, and be ready to play for England again.
So important. Even if he's physically ready and tactically sound, if his head's not in it, it's going to be really tough.
So, physical recovery, playing well consistently, being able to adapt to different positions, and mental strength. That's a lot to ask of someone. I guess the question is, does White have what it takes? Does he want it enough to overcome all of this and make his England dream happen?
That's the question, isn't it? And only he can answer it. We can talk about it all day long, weigh the pros and cons, but ultimately, it's his decision.
It's like one of those detective novels where the author leaves the ending up to you. We have all the clues, all the pieces, but the reader gets to decide how it ends.
That's what makes these deep dives so interesting. We're not here to give you all the answers. Just lay out the facts, look at things from different angles, and let you, the listener, make up your own mind.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we want you to think about this. Is Ben White's time with England over for good? Or is this just one chapter in a story that might not have a clear ending? We've given you the information, the arguments, but you get to decide what you think.
And we hope you keep digging, keep exploring these stories that you find interesting, because that's what it's all about. Discovering new things, asking questions, and always trying to learn more.
We'll be back soon with another deep dive into a new topic. Until then, keep those minds curious.
Thanks for tuning in to The Sound of Sport TV, where we bring you the latest sports news and the hottest beats to keep your energy high. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more thrilling updates. Until next time, stay tuned and stay sporty.